Welcome back to Fossil Ridge Games. Today we are going to be talking about Nebula for Marvel Champions Living Card Game. Spending time in Nebula's alter ego form can be kind of lucrative. So all you have to do is remember that you can get some fantastic card drawing if you're in her alter ego form. All you have to do is play down one of these technique upgrades, and then she's going to draw 2 cards. You can only do it once per round, but this is a great way to draw a card. Next up is Combat Protocols. When she is in her hero mode, she's going to burn every single one of her technique cards at the beginning of her turn. So right when you're in hero mode, anything that's up on the table, any of these technique cards, she's going to immediately trigger the special effect, and then the card is going to go to the discard pile. And for each one of these that are face up on the table, she's going to trigger all of them. So the name of the game with Nebula is to try to have as many technique cards out on the table as possible. And then what you want to do is amplify those cards. So there are 3 copies in this deck of Lethal Intent. What this card does is it allows you to pay X resources, and X is going to be equal to the number of these upgrade cards that you want to trigger an additional time. So think of it this way: if you have a bunch of these out on the table, immediately she's going to burn them, but then if you want to build up for next turn, you can maybe put down a couple of these technique cards. Then if you want, you can play a copy of Lethal Intent, and you can trigger the specials on them before she burns them on the next turn. So basically what I want you to think of is that you're getting use of the card twice, but you have to be on the lookout for these 3 copies of Lethal Intent. If you can do that, and if you can remember and keep resources available for it, you can double up a lot of these cards, and you're going to outpace the enemy very quickly. The next thing that is kind of overlooked when you play Nebula is that the top of the technique card is a special ability. And since this is an upgrade, when this technique card is on the table, you're going to gain an additional effect. So each and every one of these technique cards has a different sort of upgrade effect on them as well. So as an example, this Weapons Master has at the top, while in hero form, Nebula gains Retaliate 1. So that's kind of cool. You're going to gain special abilities, and then on top of it, you can trigger the bottom of the card at the start of the turn. Another example is on the right. So Cutthroat Ambition has, when Nebula's in hero form, her attacks gain Piercing and Overkill. That's pretty cool. So she's going to gain the ability to really cut through and hack up enemy defenses. So just remember that you're going to have kind of 2 things going on. Right when you put it out, you can have the upgrade. Then at the beginning of your next turn, you can trigger the special effect, or you can trigger these special effects with Lethal Intent. So she's a little bit complicated to play, but you just have to keep your eyes open and remember that pretty much for every technique card, there's going to be 2 different effects going on at the same time. Here is a somewhat subtle chain reaction of events that you can play with Nebula. It's almost kind of like a built-in combo, but if you haven't seen it before, you definitely want to know that it's there. So Nebula doesn't have a lot of hit points, so don't be afraid to spend a decent amount of time in her alter ego mode. You can do a lot of cool things, and you can build up her power significantly as she's healing and recovering. So the first thing that you want to do is you can play Combat Ready. And the top part of the card is kind of cool. You can shuffle up to 2 technique upgrades from your discard pile into your deck. But that's not the really cool part. The bottom part of the card, if you choose that option, this is where you have a chain reaction of events. You can discard cards from the top of your draw deck until you get a technique. So this is a 0 casting cost event. You play it and you start flipping cards in your discard pile, and then let's say you get an upgrade card. Now, what's cool about Combat Ready is that you put the upgrade into play. It doesn't say that you have to pay for it. So anytime you put something into play, it simply comes out and you don't have to pay for the resources. So for 0, you flip through your deck, you get a technique upgrade. It comes into play for free. Then what happens, since you put a technique card into play, it triggers her cybernetic upgrades. You get to draw 2 cards. Then on top of it, the bottom part of Combat Ready says that you can trigger this special ability on the upgrade that you just pulled. So then what happens is you can trigger the special ability, which is, in this case, remove 3 threat from a scheme. So for a zero cost event card, you just have this big chain reaction of events that occur, and that's pretty awesome. Not only that, but Nebula's building up for a turn that she can come out and then just wail on the enemy or deal a lot of threat mitigation. So let's say when she's in alter ego mode, you're building up some additional cards. She's going to become super powered as you're kind of building up, and then when you flip her over at the start of her next turn, when she's in hero mode, you're going to trigger all these events again. So you can just have these crazy chain reaction events occur, and it's pretty cool. So Nebula definitely, I think, has a pretty cool alter ego string of stuff that you can do, much more so than a lot of the other heroes I've seen in this game. Obviously, if you spend a lot of time in your alter ego mode, the villain is going to scheme and you're going to build up threats really quickly. This card, Evasive Maneuvering, I found to be very beneficial. Not so much the top part of the card, but the bottom part of the card allows you to stun or confuse an enemy. If you want to go into your alter ego mode, you want to confuse the enemy, then you're going to flip over. When you are flipped over, the villain will kind of miss their scheming phase because they have a confuse effect card on them, and then they're going to lose that effect card, and they're basically going to skip their confuse action for that turn. So just understand that although you're in your alter ego form and you're vulnerable to schemes, you do have one way to do it, and I kept using this card over and over again. I wish there were more of them in the deck. But that kind of leads me to the next topic, which is the Justice theme and confusion cards. When putting together a Justice deck, I used all of these cards and they seemed to work fairly effectively. I swapped them in and out and tried all 3 of them, and I liked all of them. The first one's a Sonic Rifle. It's a 2-charge weapon that you can confuse the enemy. That's pretty cool. It's a little bit pricey at 3. And then in the middle, I actually used this one a fair amount, was Think Fast. And this is cool. You can take a point of damage to confuse the villain. It only costs 1 to bring out. So right before you're about to flop over into alter ego mode, you can take a point of damage, confuse the enemy, and then you're basically safe for a round because the enemy's confused and they won't be really doing those heavy schemes against you. Then the one on the right is also a little bit hefty in price. If you pay a physical resource while you're bringing it out, you can also hit for 3 points of damage and confuse the enemy. So I felt that when I was playing Justice, I think confusing the enemy was great because I wanted to spend a little bit extra time in alter ego mode to build up all of those card draws and do those cool combos that I just showed you using things like Combat Ready and her native ability, which allows her to draw cards, which is the Cybernetic Upgrades ability on her. I liked Cutthroat Ambition with playing some of the aggression style cards. As an example, when she's in hero form, she's got Piercing and Overkill when this thing is out. So something fun to play is Melee, and you can do 3 damage to an enemy and then 3 damage to another enemy. What's great about this is that the attack, both of these attacks, both the enemies that you're going to hit, you're going to have Piercing and Overkill on both of them. So I thought that was kind of cool, especially if you want to kind of wipe out multiple toughness tokens. Something else I really kind of liked with this theme is that since you have the ability to gain Piercing and Overkill in the deck, I would then throw some additional cards with Piercing into the deck. So it gives you a much higher opportunity to do Piercing. And then kind of along the same lines, then I would throw in Relentless Assault for Overkill. So if you use these cards together, you have a lot of opportunity to do Overkill and Piercing in this deck, and it's kind of like a theme that you can have going on with it. This expansion comes with 2 copies of Defensive Training. I tried this card out several times, and I thought it was really, really cool. This is something that I would run in a lot of protection decks. So the way this card works is that you're going to throw 2 counters onto this card, and you can exhaust the card and burn a counter to grab a protection event from your discard pile and then shuffle it into your deck. I thought this was really cool and very, very useful and versatile. So some of the cards that I was kind of playing around with, and I'll just show you a few of them that I really liked recycling. So the first one is going to be Shake It Off, and after a Guardian character takes any amount of damage from an attack, give that character a tough status card. This actually made Nebula fairly tanky, because, I mean, yeah, even if you take a hit, you can still defend against it, and, you know, you can soak up a little bit of the damage, but then what it does is give you a toughness, you know, card on you, so that next time you can just soak up the whole attack. And then you can recycle it with the defensive training. I thought it was pretty awesome. Something else I really liked with Nebula is Perseverance. And since I was changing forms with her fairly often because she has low hit points and I like being in her alter ego mode, when I turn back into a hero, what's pretty cool is that I can get a tough status card also and put it on her. So this also made her really tanky, and I'm a lot more likely to be changing forms with her because of her low hit point total, and I like her alter ego special ability. And then kind of one of my old favorites, it's actually not that old, but I love this card a lot, is Never Back Down. You can get +2 on defense when you're blocking something, and then you can stun the attacking enemy. Once again, then you recycle it with defensive training. So if you have all 3 of these cards in the deck, and I had all 9 of them in conjunction with defensive training, she was just like a super soaker. She could just soak up a ton of damage. It was really surprising, especially because she only has 9 hit points. Now, the other thing great about this combo, there's nothing special about Nebula. You can do this with any character that you want to play protection with. Just throw defensive training and then copies of Shake It Off, Perseverance, and Never Back Down, and you can have a really tanky character, and it can be almost anybody. At this stage of the game, when I'm playing the leadership aspect, I'm starting to gravitate more towards a lot of the Guardian style allies. You know, when Guardians of the Galaxy first came out, there weren't a ton of Guardians actually in the set, but now you pretty much have a wide variety of allies that you can play with the Guardian trait. So welcome aboard. It's on the left-hand side of the screen. I really like this card a lot. It just basically gives you a nice boost of 2 resources when you're playing out a Guardian ally. And I really like the Guardian allies that are in the set. You know, like as an example is Groot. This thing, especially, I don't even care what you're playing, but this card is absolutely fantastic. It has 6 hit points and can absolutely just soak up damage. So I highly encourage people to play Groot, and then obviously if you do welcome aboard and you have a bunch of the other Guardians of the Galaxy characters, those are great as well. And then another card that is kind of gaining favor with me is on the right-hand side of the screen. I've done a gazillion of these Marvel Champion videos. I really like a lot of the allies that when they come into play, it triggers some sort of special effect. And I've done like numerous videos where you can like recycle these. So Regroup on the right, I was messing around with this in the Nebula deck, and I was having a fun time with this, just triggering all of the different special effects when something comes into the game, and then you basically just burn them out. You let the villain eat them and just beat the snot out of them, and then you save them basically when they're defeated, and then you return it back to your hand, and then you put them down again, and it triggers the event again when they come into play. You can do just a lot of ridiculous things with leadership. So if you haven't tried Regroup, that's on the right. I highly recommend it. Like I said, I did it with Nebula, and it was a lot of fun. To summarize, I think the Nebula Hero Pack, as always, it's just totally different. It has a different feel than all the other characters I've ever played. You know, I keep saying this over and over again, but I'm really surprised every time you play a new Hero Pack how different it feels, and really just how unique each of these hero sets are. So, you know, for Nebula, she has all of these fantastic like technique upgrades, and then she has like almost these sort of built-in combos that you can do with her, with like combat ready and then lethal intent. It almost feels like you know, just a really good combo feel and a combo deck, and you can pull these fairly decent string of events out, and it feels like, you know, your turn is really long and fairly satisfying when a lot of these events go off. So I highly recommend trying out Nebula. I think that she's pretty versatile all around. I typically was playing her solo when I was doing a lot of the demo games. I tried to play it with some of the harder villains. I think she was able to kind of hold her own. I think her damage output is something that you gotta kind of watch just a little bit, especially if you're playing solo. I found it just a little bit kind of on the low side, unless I was playing aggression. And I had very long games if I was playing like some of the other aspects. So just be careful with that. But when you're playing in a group game, and I only was able to play 2 of the group games, I thought that she held her own very well. I felt that, some of the combo strings that she was doing, it actually felt kind of happy to be doing it. Some of the other players were like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, watching those effect chains go off. So I think that was pretty neat. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. I always like kind of showcasing these new heroes and then just giving you some ideas of some stuff that I tried when I was playtesting this stuff. I can't always do every single combo and whatnot, but hopefully this has given you some place to start with Nebula, and maybe you've learned some of your own tips and tricks so you can pass those on. So I want to thank you for joining me today, and as always, have fun gaming.